Hello and welcome to Sunday's Terrace podcast. I'm Graeme Thewliss, and as you can see, I'm joined by Craig Anderson.
Hello, how are we doing?
Good. I realised I said as you can see, but maybe you can't because you might actually not be watching it on YouTube, but you can and you should be enjoying Craig and I in our respective offices after a weekend where both of our teams won, and it's very pleasant. It's good. Yeah. It's good. Yeah. No Jambos on either because they're all part-timers.
Yeah, it's always it's that magic sweet spot where you've got two jubilant podcasters. Given the selection of clubs we support, it doesn't happen all that often, but by law of averages, it has to sometimes.
At some point, it has to happen. So, given that we've got two jubilant podcasters, what we're going to do is start somewhere where neither of us were involved and no one is happy. So, we're going to go to Livingston and the Tony Mac. Still,
I think so until next season.
Till next season, still Tony Mac. Where Livingston defeated St Johnstone 2-1, and various chickens are coming home to roost for me for St Johnstone. What were you, Craig?
Yeah, it was interesting though, because probably for the first time in a while, and perhaps it's down to the quality of the opposition, they did create a bunch of chances, because I was watching the highlights of this and I was like, I thought St Johnstone scored inside the first 10 minutes, but yet they kept showing chances where they didn't score. And I was like, I must have got mixed up. And then, no, Sidibe's goal goes in. And it's like, no, that was 8 minutes. Livingston had already conceded 4 gilt-edged chances at that point. But yeah, it was the same feeling zone, I think. For me, certainly, I mean, and you do have to remember, they were god-awful before Levine took over. Like, they were really circling the drain under McLean, even at the start of the season. But I said at the time when he got appointed, I thought it's not going to be fun to watch, but he'll probably do enough, or he's given them the best chance of survival. But I don't think that's really panned out that way. I think he's been his own worst enemy in terms of he got initially St Johnstone into a position where they'd like pulled themselves back out from the brink, basically, because they were looking in a real nick kind of October time. And then they got some wins. You thought, right, Levine's got some wins, and now they just need to kind of grind out to the end of the season and revise there. But they've gone backwards. They've gone miles backwards since January. They are the dullest team in the league to watch by a mile, and even when it's going well, they seem to be shooting themselves in the foot. And Livingston, fair play to them, they came into the game and they took two good goals that St Johnstone won't be that happy with, but how many chances does Nicky Clark want?
It's mad. And like I say, in terms of things coming home to roost, like I fairly sure I said this right at the very start of the season, and I've said it, I think, multiple times throughout the season as well. Like St Johnstone are in a very bad place in that they have an ownership that didn't want to particularly invest anything because they're looking to punt the club on. And while I agree with you, Levine's not done it. Like he's kind of hamstrung by that in large respect, and the fact that the squad assembled just was not good. The squad is not a good squad put together. There's a whole collection of players there that are either out of contract or coming to the end of their careers, and very few of them look like they're playing to stay at St Johnstone as well. And I've got like an ongoing level of sympathy for like Liam Gordon as well, and that he's just in the wrong movie at the moment, and he just desperately needs a fresh start, whether that's away from St Johnstone or whether that's just a completely fresh breath of fresh air throughout the
a new league to play in with St Johnstone,
or a breath of fresh air throughout the club as well. As a guy who is a St Johnstone fan and very clearly will care enormously about it and has had wonderful memories with them, and I do really feel for having guys like Stevie Mayer who are somehow still kicking around there as well. And while I have sympathy for Craig Levein and the fact that he can only do what he can do with the bodies that he has and the limited resources that they're willing to give him, but similarly, like, you are, even at the point where you've conceded a goal, a draw is still not necessarily a disaster for them. It's not great, but again, it's just sort of stems the tide to the smallest degree. Like, they also have a marginally better goal difference than Ross County now,
especially now, aye.
Which is high. So like a point this week, a point next week could just about have been enough. With a couple of minutes to go, you hook your two central midfielders in McPherson. And again, McPherson I'm fairly up and down on. I don't think he's a wonderful player, but again, he seems like a sensible option within there. And Phillips, who probably has been St Johnstone's best outfield player this season as well, like a guy who will work very hard for the team. And again, I didn't watch the 90 minutes of the game. I don't know. Maybe both of them are absolutely blown. But to do that and then almost immediately concede a goal with somebody standing free within your 18-yard box, it's just, and again, the players that you're bringing on, they're not better players than what you're taking off. And you're just shooting yourself in the foot. Like, it was something that we sort of started as a gag, but I'm now coming around to the fact that Craig Levein is attempting to get St Johnstone relegated in order to then try and bring them back up and finally win a trophy in his barren career.
He must have won I think he won the first division with Hearts as a player.
As a manager.
Potentially. As a manager, maybe not. As a manager, maybe not. But
no, I don't think he was manager either of the times Hearts got relegated.
No. But I think the problem for me is, and it was a theme across the weekend, like the defending this weekend for a lot of the goals, you could pinpoint it in almost every single game. In fact, I think it probably is every single game this weekend. There were howling defensive errors, and that winning goal. I get that St Johnstone, it did really look like they were chasing a victory, and maybe it's really hard to know. There is a bit of like game theory at this point in the season. Do you try to sacrifice a point for trying to win two? It depends sometimes, and I can understand it a bit, but at the time, the fact that the initial ball from, I think it was the initial ball from Bradley, wasn't that good, and then and it's just like that two bites of the cherry thing. It's like, you can understand getting caught on the hop, but getting caught on the hop again after you've done it right the first time.
You're not caught on the hop if it's the second time.
Yeah. So it was just, there was just too much of that. And fair play to Shinnie, I think he's probably underwhelmed the last 2 years at Livingston, to be honest, but it's a good finish. And I think what we've seen from Livingston is that I don't think they're as bad as being as far adrift as they are, but they just got themselves into a rut. I think that you've seen that. I think that's a couple of wins recently. Like they're better than what you've seen from them. They're deservedly relegated because they've not done it. But you keep seeing these wee moments, and you're like, all that's missing here is that you've completely fallen apart defensively in the middle of the season. I mean, you saw the defending in the early part of the game as well from them. Shamal George, I mean, all those Nicky Clark chances more or less all came from some really, really shoddy defending. But George had a good game to keep them in it, but he didn't have the best season. The defence didn't have the best season, but it's nice for them to kind of at least get a couple of moments before they go down.
Yeah, you go into next season with at least just a faint amount of optimism. Like, we did actually hold our own in like the last 5 games. I was actually going to bring this up. In like the last 5 games, basically feel like Livy in a nutshell. And you're exactly right. Like, they drew with Aberdeen, then they lost 4-2 at Hearts, having been leading 2-0. They beat Ross County 2-0. They lost to Motherwell 4-1, and then they beat St Johnstone 2-1 in the last seconds of the game. Like, those 5 games do feel like Livingston in a nutshell entirely. Like, again, like even the Hearts game, Livy teams in years past would have just dug in at 2-0, and at the very least come away with a point. They certainly wouldn't have conceded another 4 goals before half time. Like, it's just not what they would have done. So I think you're absolutely right. I think they I think it's just a lack of they're just missing that maybe 1 player, 2 players within that squad in order to turn around what has been a fairly dismal season into being one where it would have been a 3-way battle, potentially avoid relegation within that there. And yeah, you can see they're already doing business and already sort of sign up players that we've seen today, actually, in terms of accidentally linking the wrong player within tweets and stuff like that as well. So they're doing plenty of business and they're getting plenty of bodies in. And just rounding off the season, they've got Aberdeen and Hibernian left. One team who suddenly look like they might have something about them, and one team that look like they've got absolutely nothing about them on the final day in Hibernian. And it just gives them an opportunity to just enter just clear out a collection of bodies who will be out of contract, and maybe look forward to next season with a slight amount of optimism.
Is there a single more David Martindale signing than Robbie Muirhead?
No, absolutely not.
The undoubted talent scored a lot of goals for Morton over the last 2 seasons, but also, as you saw with his kind of final moment for Morton, there's a wee bit of a screw loose at times, and I'll be interested to see how that goes, because it could go, you could either be the top scorer in the championship next season or like loaned out to another championship club by September.
Yeah, bombed out by a month. There's like has a starts on fire in the League Cup campaign, and then by the second game of the season is back at Morton.
Yeah, who knows? Who knows?
Entirely possible. We'll move on to another team who maybe have a slight amount of optimism. That said, they were playing possibly the worst team in the division at this moment in time, as Aberdeen today thumped Hibernian 4-0 at Easter Road with about 25 people watching, and a truly, truly dismal performance from a Hibernian side who they're very much done. They're very much looking to move on, but for some reason or another have not yet. Quick note on Aberdeen: played some really nice stuff. Played some really good stuff. Scored some really nice goals against what appeared to be a team of those defensive mannequins that they stick in ground at training. And we also saw a first goal for a man who sounds like a regen, but his name is Fletcher Boyd.
Yes, what a name.
Yeah, unbelievable. Simply has to be Scotland's centre forward at this point to right the various wrongs of the past. As much as Aberdeen were good in this game, and again, giving them credit for turning up at Easter Road and absolutely leathering Hibernian, what on earth are Hibernian looking? What are they doing at this point? It's something we spoke about last week a little bit as well, but I cannot fathom what Hibernian Football Club are attempting to do.
It really, I mean, it's understandable to lose games at this point in the season because there's not a lot there to play for and stuff like that, but it really felt like as the game trickled on, that they are not playing for their manager anymore, and I think at that point when it hits this stage, there really isn't a future there for Montgomery. Really, there can't be. There can't be a future for him.
That would very much be my assumption, that there cannot be a future for Nick Montgomery at Hibernian. However, he remains Hibernian manager, and as a club who are now on to their fifth manager in the best part of 2.5 seasons odd. Surely not. I get it. If you're a Hibs fan, you're presumably very worried at this stage that he's not been emptied yet. But I understand the idea that maybe it's the end of the season, it's just a break, and everyone goes off and does whatever they're going to do. But just get him out of stinking the place out at the moment. He's doing absolutely no favours to anyone while being there. They are dreadful, atrocious, and I agree with you. It's having seen multiple Motherwell teams chuck it for various managers, that very much looks like a team that's absolutely chucked it.
Yeah, it was a later part. I mean, it's a nice goal from Boyd, who is now I think only 221 goals away from being the top scoring Boyd in Scottish football history. So he's on the march, but he is given so much space. It's almost like in a testimonial, we'll let the young boy score, because it felt like that. But like Aberdeen were maybe trying to put. I mean, it was put on a plate for him, but why are they not picking up a player who's at that point? But you saw it with the third goal as well, where I think it's Clarkson steps over the ball really nicely, and Miovski kind of comes in. But the defending, I think it's Bashiri who's meant to be picking up Miovski, he's just not near him, and it was all a bit like that. And I think there's a real I don't see where the positivity about some of these Hibs players comes from, because I think they had a decent start to the season in the European game. I mean, I'm really talking about one European game, because they obviously started the season getting Horst and Andorra, but they obviously the win over I was going to say Lucerne. Was it Lucerne? It wasn't Lucerne, was it? Whoever the Swiss team they beat. It was Lucerne. It was. I was thinking because they beat St Johnstone a few years ago, but or lost to St Johnstone. They played St Johnstone. I was like, it can't be them again, but it's them again. Was the kind of best we saw of them. And then there were wee glimmers when Montgomery came in, but all in all, far too many players that are just not Hibs standard. And like Venti, the big money signing, not seen much from him. The marquee January signing, Marcondes, Ewan and I spoke about him on the top 12 attacking midfielders podcast that I don't know if it's out yet, but we spoke about that one. But there are too many players in there that are just simply not good enough. I would have said that about Aberdeen as well, right enough, and maybe it will still ring true, but So we got a bit of heat for not picking Clarkson in that top 12. Personally, didn't come into my consideration at all. I thought he was very good last season, but I mean, he has not had a good season at all. But he had what looked like a really good game here, and that goal that he scored is kind of what we expected to see. I mean, a really big assist from Jojo Wallacott, who looked absolutely hopeless for each of the first two goals. Like, they're good finishes, but like they're not that far away from him, and I think a better goalkeeper saves both. But so just nothing to like about Hibs' performance. Like, on the ball, they were probably all right, and they built things up, and you saw that like in the first wee bit of the game, created some chances. Maybe if they score early, maybe it's a different game. But then as soon as they went 1-0 down, it was like they just fell apart. They stood off everything. A bit hiding, I think, and Hoylett was running riot against them. And again, Hoylett, for much of his Aberdeen career, did absolutely nothing, and then he's turned it on probably from that cup semi-final onwards, and it's kind of when it after that when it didn't matter for Aberdeen. But yeah, it's really hard to I find it really hard to analyse games like this, because like saying one team was absolutely terrible and the other team looked good, but you don't know how much of that was down to the opponent. Like, there's only so many ways you can say that without.
And like again, like I do fully agree with you as well. There are a whole collection of those Hibs players that I don't think are very good. Similarly, I would be quite concerned as a Hibernian fan, and I'm aware that Stevenson and Hanlon has almost become a bit of a gag in terms of the fact that they're still starting games and playing in games and stuff like that. What I would say is that it's very clear, patently clear, of how much of an influence they have over Hibernian as a club and as a dressing room. If you then remove them from that, and again, I think the time is probably right for that now, if not already, should potentially already have happened. But to then see those guys leave the club, you're then looking around that Hibs dressing room in terms of like, well, if they are the guys who have been leading the dressing room, running the dressing room, being that conduit between players, management, staff, everything else, are respected and well thought of within that, who else is there that's going to do that? Like, you're looking at long-serving Hibs players in there like Josh Campbell, potentially, again, not a regular within the squad. It looks like Newell's probably on his way in the summer as well. He'll be the other guy who'd look to be doing that there as well.
Is maybe the only one that is probably still there who might have. But yeah, because I think Campbell, I would imagine, will be one who will want to move on. And I think he'll find another Premiership club, and I think he might be a David Witherspoon situation where he gets away from Hibs. He looks a bit better. Because I think there's enough things to like about him.
I agree.
He's not played much, and I mean, but yeah, that would be my major concern, is that I think a lot of the experienced core will leave Hibs and will be replaced by very young, very raw players with Bournemouth connections who may be good or may not be good, but will not have the kind of battle-worn kind of stuff that I think...
You can almost trace that back to the last time Hibs were like that, was when they were getting battered by Hearts in cup finals, and it's the stories of like Matt Doherty being on loan at Hibs and like pissing himself laughing in the changing room afterwards, and Gary O'Connor wanting to tear his head off. Like, it kind of feels going almost immediately back to that scenario.
It can go two ways, because of course maybe they Ben Montgomery bring in a manager even who just happens to be a really good man. Like they might strike lucky, but it feels like it will be lucky rather than like it's a 1 in 10 chance that it actually works for me. So yeah, I would be worried as well, because I think they're deluding themselves with this. Like, oh, we've got 7 million coming in. Most of that 7 million is going to be funneled to Bournemouth Football Club. Like that, the stuff that's not being used to do stadium renovations or whatever. Like, make sure your bar's nice and shiny, will be going to Bournemouth Football Club to sign Bournemouth Football Club players on loan. If it's not going to Bournemouth, it will be going to one of the other clubs owned by the Bournemouth group, but it will most likely be going to Bournemouth. It feels like that 7 million is like a bit pie in the sky. Maybe I'll be wrong, and maybe they'll be buying promising players left, right and centre from all over the place, but I don't think they will.
I would agree on that. For someone who's, I was going to do a link there. I'm not going to do a link there. It's quite late. Well, let's go to Dingwall, where Ross County kind of escaped, having not actually lost anything other than potentially the advantage of the goal difference, as Ross County were thoroughly pumped by Motherwell Football Club 5-1, which feels like a weirdly common scoreline between these sides. I'm quite concerned at Livingston going down, because I think David Martindale's only beaten Livingston have only beaten Motherwell, I think, 3 times during their time in the top flight, which means that immediately next season Motherwell are going to lose a whole bunch of points that we would already have on the board. And if Ross County were to go down as well, that would be very, very poor as well, given that it seems every time we go to Dingwall at the moment we win 5-1. Motherwell were quite good. Quite good fun. A good nonsense, given that at a point in the season where nothing particularly matters anymore, Motherwell turned into a free-scoring nonsense of a football team. But roundly again, so it's just kind of following on from stuff that I'd said last week in terms of like just doing things which are like sensible in terms of preparation for next season, ultimately, and giving Nicholson the role that he should be putting in, playing Halliday, making sure there's more tape of Lennon Miller in the go. If we can, so much of Motherwell this year, I think, and so much of whether Motherwell will be good or any cop next year, is going to be almost entirely reliant on whether we can hold on to somebody like George Gent as well, who has been tremendous, continues to be tremendous, and whether or not Theo Bair fancies a second season in Lanarkshire, my suspicion is probably not.
I think it might be a Connor Salmon situation with Theo Bair, with Motherwell, from Motherwell's point of view, where it's like, do you really fancy that this player is going to have another season as good as the one he's just had? And if the answer is no, then sell while you can. That would be my view with him.
I kind of agree with you as well, but again, this game's such a good example of how much better a player he is than when he arrived at Motherwell. And that he did not score in this game, was entirely unselfish, almost to a fault, but provided 2 goals through this game as well. And Ross County started the game okay. Laidlaw chucking in the first for Spittle is... It felt like a very... I like Ross Laidlaw. I think he's a good goalkeeper. I think he's probably at this moment in time the best goalkeeping option that they have. I thought the Wickens came in and did really well, but I think felt like he was kind of struggling on the week, playing every single week. That said, Laidlaw is capable of things like this every so often, and yeah.
All I will say, I think from watching this game, it was very clear why George Wickens had that game where he had to make about 900 saves at Ibrox, because I've not seen defending like this in a very long time. It was the early chance where the entire Motherwell team seemed to just be able to run right down the middle of the defence. Like you're trying to stay in the division. Your form had turned a wee bit. Like they obviously got that really good result against Rangers, and it felt like they were kind of on the up. And then all of a sudden, like, it wasn't just that they were poor, because you can have a bad day. It was like calamitous, and in so many different ways. Because the midfield disappeared. The centre halves were all, and they brought one on who was equally stinking, and your goalkeeper is letting you down, and that is never a good recipe. But that first goal, I don't think I've ever seen a goalkeeping mistake like that before.
It's almost, if you haven't seen it, I would implore you to go to the SPFL YouTube page, no free ads, and have a look at the goal, because it's under no pressure. It's not taking a weird bounce. It's none of those things. It's just a complete literal drop of in concentration from Laidlaw, as he just takes all the pace off the ball in order to drop it at Blair Spittle's feet.
Fair play. It was a nice composed finish, I would say, because I think more players miss that than you would expect, to be honest. It just... Because
again, it's so out of the ordinary. It's not the sort of thing you practice every day, of sort of the goalkeeper dropping it at your feet, so you just sort of skip round them and then knock it in. I fully agree with you as well, and I am... Like, fair play to Blair Spittle. I think we talked about this in the group chat the other day as well, in terms of like how much he's made it this season and how high he featured in your top 12 attacking midfielders list. And I don't know if I meant to reply to that. I don't know if I couldn't remember whether I did or whether I meant to when you were saying that it's maybe an indication of the quality of the league this season isn't so high that Spittle's in there. I think it's simply a case of there's a whole series of Scottish footballers, and I presume it happens elsewhere, I just don't pay nearly as much attention. A whole series of guys who seem to understand and click with them in Scotland how to actually play football and what they're good at and be utilised for what they're good at. It's just unfortunate that when they do it, they're about 28 or 29 years old. Spittle's always been a guy that's been rated and talented and well thought of, but to have the season of his life at this point, I am disappointed he's not staying with us simply, and I like watching him play, and I don't think he'll play enough at Hearts next year to be anything like as effective as he has been for us. I don't think he'll be given his freer role, and that's one of the Spittle's great benefits, is that he is a very versatile player and he's a very hard working player. For someone who has, I think it's 11 assists and 9 goals now, he almost, those sorts of numbers sort of indicate that he's probably a bit of a luxury player, but it's simply not the case. Like he spends his entire game hounding and harrying defenders, and it's goals like the one against Laidlaw where he just keeps making runs that eventually you are rewarded for behaviour like that on a football field. If you keep going, you will eventually get chances that you shouldn't really get. And yeah, disappointed he's leaving because he's been tremendous for us for the last sort of season and a half, where he really sort of found his feet within the Motherwell team, and he's been tremendous. Hopefully Nicholson will step in and sort of start to fill that void a little bit for us. One other final note from me in this game is quite how disastrously poor the defending from Loic Aina was in a weekend of bad defending and bad decisions made by defenders. His defending for Davos Zadrowski's goal was pathetic, ultimately. The player takes one step away from him and you just, I'll see you later then.
It's like a parting gift from Derek Adams. Like they got rid of him, but they're still being haunted by him. But Aina, if you watch back to Dundee United 0 Kilmarnock 3 from the penultimate game of last season, so round about exactly this time of the season last year, his contribution to the opening goal that I think it was Kyle Vassell scored was ridiculous. Like, it's exactly the same. It's like a centre half who has no notion of any aspect of defending. And as I said, the defending in the first half was bad, but they brought him on and managed to make it worse. It felt like, unlike where Hibs' defence fell apart, and it felt like because they just given up, for Ross County it felt like their defence fell apart even further because they decided they were getting beat and they were just going to like try and attack. And I don't, as you said, with the goal difference equation, I don't know if that was the right thing to do, because I think when it went to 3-1 especially, you're probably not getting... I was going to say, you're probably not getting back in that game. Did they not get back from 3-1 down against Motherwell, or either that or throw away earlier this season?
It was thrown away. I think it was 3-1 up when Motherwell were going through that period of simply failing to lose games.
But there is too much nonsense in that Ross County squad. However, if they do end up in the playoff, I think they are more likely to be able to score a lot of goals against whoever it is from the Championship.
Yeah.
Simon Murray scoring yet again, even in this kind of shit show of a game, and it was a really well taken goal. It was a really nice through ball as well. But
I'm firmly of the belief that if Ross County go into the playoffs, they will stay up with probably not too much of a fuss.
If they go into the playoffs, it'll be like 7-4 on aggregate, and if St Johnstone go into the playoffs, it'll be 2-0 on aggregate to the Championship team.
Yeah, if St Johnstone go into the playoffs, they will go down. That's solid this weekend, even more so. I was fairly convinced of that in any case, but this weekend more than ever is solidified my belief in that. If St Johnstone in the playoff, they will go down. They simply do not have the quality or the wherewithal, or I think the desire at this point to stay up, so they will go down. Anyway, moving from the bottom dwellers to slightly further up the table. Craig, would you like to tell us about a nice day in Paisley?
Yeah, let's go for it, yes. So it was, I have to say, like, Kelly had obviously gone into the split 8 points clear of St Mirren, and I said, I don't know if I remember if I said it on the podcast, but it was what I was thinking. St Mirren probably won't get 8 points after the split. It's quite a big achievement for any team to manage to get 8 points after the split when two of your opponents are Rangers and Celtic. But I did have that lingering fear hanging over me, and even when we got the point against Hearts and St Mirren lost to Rangers in the first post-split game, and that was 9 points, with Kelly also having a far superior goal difference with 4 games to go. It does go into your head, you're like, well, if we lose to Rangers at Ibrox and St Mirren beat Dundee, and that did both happen last weekend, then it's like we play each other. If they beat us, it's down to 3 points, and then we host Celtic while they're at home to a Hearts team with nothing to play for. And I was like plotting this path, and then I'm like, and what if Celtic beat us and win the league? Then they're playing St Mirren on the last day, and they might not have much to play for, and they might have an eye on the cup final. So I was like, you can see this route. Even though I didn't believe it from this Kelly team and I had every faith in them, you can plot that route to fucking it up. So it was really nice yesterday to get the job done on their own terms and to get it done early. Not a particularly amazing game of football, it has to be said, but Kelly doing, I think, what they've done a lot more of away from home this season, which is to be tougher to beat, to be defensively resolute, and to create chances, none of which we really did away from home much last season. To say it took us until April in Paisley, funnily enough, to get an away win last season, whereas this year there have been many, and the ones that we haven't lost have mostly been draws. And that's been the big difference this year, has been the away form, because the home form's been pretty much the same. It's not been that different, but the away form is picked up. And that's why it's a bit of a slow burner, but outside the Steve Clarke team, there's probably the best performing Kelly team. It is the best performing Kelly team in 20 years. And that in itself, they've been good fun to watch. And it was really fitting that it was the captain that got the winning goal. And what a goal it was.
It was, if you were to describe anything as an emphatic finish, that was an emphatic finish from Kyle Vassell.
He does it often. He tries to take the skin off it. I've seen a few goals from him like that, and fair play, it does seem to work for him. Just
really taking out every emotion he has straight into the family stand.
he's been playing through an injury since about February, I think. I don't know if it's a hernia or something that there's been some injury that he's been kind of having to put himself through, kind of painkillers and all that to keep playing. And he's played every single week. And I'd sent a message to Al Mitchell, friend of the show, kind of saying instead of Mr. November, it's Mr. May with Kyle Vassell, because when it comes to the crunch, that guy scores goals. Talked about that Dundee United game last season, the final day against Ross County last season, the game at St Mirren where we won last season, and it's been the same this year again. As it's come to the run-in, he's been popping up with the goals, and I've said it on this, I won't go on for it too long. He got a lot of very undeserved stick because he went through a spell in, I think, from October through to maybe March, where I think he scored 1 goal in like 19 games or something. Clearly not very good for a forward, but he offers so much. Every single time we play against anyone, you look at what the opposing fans say and they absolutely hate him. They hate playing against him. And I think that's testament to that. And it was nice that it was a link up with Watkins, who has been a revelation. He's been brilliant this season. And for a 33-year-old going on 34, he made Alex Gogic look very daft. He made Alex Gogic look like he was running through treacle in the build up to that goal. It was a poor goal from St Mirren's point of view, because Tansar is really half-hearted in losing the ball to Armstrong, doesn't really get back with him, and then Gogic doesn't keep pace with Watkins at all. And that's the kind of moments, that's the kind of thing they had. I would say they had fourth place in their hands and threw it away a bit, even though I think Killie are a better team than them and have proved that. We've not lost to them this season. I think it's been 3 wins and a draw. They were miles ahead. They were obviously 2-0 up at half-time at Rugby Park not that long ago, and I think that was going to put them 4 or 5 points clear of Killie at that point, and basically ever since that turned round, it's been kind of game over for them. However, they will be able to console themselves with a probably a well-deserved spot in Europe themselves, because it has been, I think it can be a bit hard, because I was starting to worry it would go that way for us. it can be a bit hard when you've had a really good season, but it fizzles out at the end. Because it kind of, what you've achieved in 5th place will be the best finish St Mirren have had in the top flight in a very long time. But it kind of feels a bit of a disappointment somehow, which it shouldn't. But because they're up against a Kelly team with,
there's just nothing tangible in your hands at the end of the season to say, like Motherwell were a piss season, but we've finished it quite well, so I've got something tangible in my hands to look forward to.
Same as last year, with reference to the Misery Hunters podcast, and they obviously had a chat, and they thought that I was wrong with this last season, but they are up against a Kilmarnock team with a far superior manager to what St Mirren have, and I think we should stress a far superior manager. So they did well to keep the race alive for so long, but ultimately it's been that head-to-head with Robinson against that far superior manager that has killed them off. Well deserved for Kelly. The list of teams in the Europa League who we might face is both terrifying and quite fun, because Ajax have just made their way into that round today. Porto are potentially one who could pop up. I would be quite keen to go and see Kilmarnock play at either of those venues, but it's also a team who would absolutely smash us. But we'll wait and see. But the good news with that is there's obviously a fallback into the Conference League. So the guarantee of twice as many games as Angelo Alessio got in Europe, regardless of what happens, is quite good. But yeah, as I've said, I've not had much to say about the game because the game was not much of a game.
It felt that whole Vassell's goal. Like I totally agree with you. I love Vassell. I love watching Vassell and Watkins as well, because as a partnership, there's few better in the league than the two of them.
There's not many partnerships.
No, there's not many partnerships in the first place, but just anywhere on the field, the two of them, they have that. They have just that. They're absolutely in sync, and they know exactly where each other are at all times. And there's various points in this game with two of them just knocking it between them, and St Mirren defenders just looking around, trying to keep up with them, trying to figure out where they're going. There's something very fitting about the goal coming from Danny Armstrong, just being brave more than anything else. Just like, I'm going to go and stick myself in there, and worst case scenario, right, the ball goes out of play. Like, give a shit. Like, I've done my job. But then to do it, win the ball twice, while also not really winning at any point. Watkins making the run, the cross, the touch from Vassell. As I say, the finish is just brilliant as well. I do find the McInnes and Robinson thing quite interesting, because when they went sort of, they regularly went sort of hammer and tongs against each other when at Motherwell and Aberdeen, and I would say it was probably about 50-50 at that point. Like, there's like two boxers in the 12th round holding each other up at various points as well, but it would feel like Robinson would find a thing that would win the game, but then McInnes would counter it. And then the next time Aberdeen would win it because McInnes has figured it out. Next time Robinson would do something else to work on top of that as well. Whereas Kelly have really kind of held a sign over St Mirren over these last two seasons as well, with McInnes in charge. Yeah,
and I think I read that it is 1 win in 30 games against Derek McInnes that Motherwell, that St Mirren have, from his Aberdeen and his Kilmarnock time. As a man who's just inducted into the Greenock Morton Hall of Fame in midweek, I'm sure he'll be enjoying that one. But yeah, it was. Don't get me wrong. I suspect our budget is probably at this stage a wee bit higher than St Mirren's. Probably not loads higher. Obviously, for example, being able to get Van Veen away from them in January, and I do think that there was something pointed about Innes Cameron coming on for Kyle Vassell for the last 10 minutes of this game, and Van Veen sitting on the bench. It felt a little bit like McInnes not making a point to Van Veen, making a point in general about to St Mirren, and kind of because it very much seemed to me that both the signings of Stewart and Van Veen came into the category of, they're there and we really don't want anyone else to have them, and if we can get them, why not? And as it turned out, neither of them were needed, but I don't think they were signed with the intention of not playing, but I think just the form of Watkins and Vassell has kept them out. But I said Vassell had that injury. If Vassell had not had...
There's always the concern that Vassell might not have been able to play on through that as well. And I do prefer your version, though, that they just did it to spite St Mirren so that they couldn't have them.
It's worked in the sense that there was a gamble made, and whether the player who you gamble for comes through or not, it gave the fans a wee lift. It gave probably the players in the building a wee kick up the backside, and Van Veen did set up a very crucial late winner against Livingston in one of his first games, so it's not like he's contributed zero. And I think it'll be quite funny if he then starts against Celtic in midweek and somehow manages to delay that. Before we move on, I know I've ruined a perfect link for you there, but nonetheless, the Derek McInnes's aeroplane celebration at
Wonderful.
the end was it was obviously because it was such a hot day. So he had his shirt, but he had his tie off. He didn't have his jacket on. It could not have resembled more like a dad at about 10:30 p.m. at a wedding, like maybe showing off to the nieces and nephews. Like it was like so. It
was even the outfit as well. Like it was just everything about it. The fact that there's no tie, it's an open collar. Like you're absolutely spot on it being 10 p.m. Right, just cut loose, boys. I'm at a wedding. I only go out 3 times a year. Let's fucking go.
But he said in his interview that he saw Corey and Dabba doing it, and he was like, Corey. I think he said Corey's got the moves and I don't, but I thought I better join in. But I think it was interesting that was it Neil McCann on Sportscene said that he'd some managers kind of don't take part with the players, but I think McInnes is very much. I mean, he's the best man manager in the country. That's very clear, and that team very much feels like they have that appropriate layer of friendliness but respect with him. And I think it was big for him because I know people were gunning for him probably this time 14, 15 months ago, especially after the Cup quarter-final defeat against Inverness last season. I think that was in the deer for him. But he's turned it round. And I mean, I think I said at the time, I thought you have to keep a good manager at your club because you know what they can do. If he'll have his work cut out keeping a hold of some of these players next season, but if he does, I think we could easily see the same again if things go well.
I think regardless, Kilmarnock will just remain, like you say, for exactly that reason. Like Derek McInnes is a very good manager. Like I always get the impression with him at Kilmarnock, it's almost him sticking 2 fingers up at people who think that he didn't have it, or his team's only that good, or really that exciting, or whatever. Like not a bitterness about how things ended at Aberdeen, but also just a desire to highlight I'm actually really fucking good at this. Like it does feel that sort of like I'm gonna show everyone else up at almost all occasions, and he continues to do so. Anyway, speaking about people who did and didn't show up, let's go to Parkhead, where Celtic all but secured was it 12 and 13 years? 12th Premiership title in 13 years, as they defeated Rangers 2-1 in a game which was almost destined for this from the moment that any of us saw that Rangers starting lineup, I think.
Like, you're looking at that team and you're thinking, like, the centre-half pairing, I mean, I know it was kind of forced on them, but you're like, what's going on there with that centre-half pairing? There's nothing in attack that would be striking any fear whatsoever into Celtic, and the midfield is a mix and match. And it summed up the season, this game, like fully. Rangers starting really badly, Celtic being the better team and winning, but managing to do so entirely unconvincingly, which is kind of how the season's gone, because Celtic are not a good team. They're not a good team at all. This season, Celtic would not have won the league against some of Steven Gerrard's Rangers teams, potentially even. But I mean, obviously they wouldn't have won the league against the Gerrard team that did win the league, but even some of the ones before that, I feel like, because they've constantly shat the bed in these games. Like, how do you not? They go 2-0 up. They are obviously then quickly pegged back, but then their opponents go down to 10 men. They get a penalty. They have so many gilt-edged chances, and yet I wouldn't say they were holding on at the end, but they nearly managed to throw the game away.
It's closer than it needs to be at any point as well. And again, we've sort of made this gag a few times, but like, Rangers' transfer policy of signing players that wouldn't get a game for Celtic,
it's never going to work.
somehow expecting to beat them continues to be a mystery to me. And even like the changes, some of the players that started this game, and like Barisic, I'm not a great fan of Yilmaz broadly, and that he's continually injured and kind of flatters to deceive to a degree. But Barisic just does not have it. He is one of the sleepiest Old Firm players I've ever seen. Please don't tell his dad.
But,
And then
you saw James Forrest. Like, James Forrest had a field day against him. And I mean, you and I spoke about, referring back to this quite a lot, but you and I spoke about him on that Attacking Midfielders podcast as well, because he put him kind of in 12th in his list, and I didn't have him. And I was saying when we were talking about him in terms of whether he had any chance for Scotland for the summer, that, and I know it was talked about in last week's podcast as well, and I kind of thought, no, like, he's yesterday's man. Even when he, apart from that literal 1 week where he scored a hat-trick against, two against Albania and a hat-trick against Israel, he's not done a lot for Scotland. He was fine, and he had his place, but, and then he's barely played this season through partly through injury, but through like being dropped. And then I thought, so he was barely good enough when he was at his fittest, and this quality of the Scotland team's ramped up, and he's struggling to, last the pace. And I thought, I don't see any value in having him there. 25 minutes into that game, I'm like, no, let's get this guy on the plane, get him.
You might start against Germany. You might start him against Germany at this stage.
Because he was so direct. Yes, Barisic made it very easy for him, and the fact that he obviously had no help from in front of him with Barisic, which is always the risk when you're setting up with Silva in front of him. We're coming on to Silva, who actually put in one of his better performances in a way, but he's not going to defend. He's not going to help his fullback against a winger, and we saw that. But Forrest was peppering the Rangers goal. He was putting balls in, everything you want to see from a winger. The sort of thing that has been missing from this Celtic team is just directness from the wide areas. It's been a lot of like guys like Palma and Kuhn, and we spoke about them on that podcast as well. Clear talent, but those little bits and pieces where you're like they don't have necessarily the cutting edge that I think you would want. Forrest was like all cutting edge in that game. So yeah, there was a lot to like about his performance, and I think there's a lot to like in the first half about the performances of O'Reilly and McGregor. Hatate was absolutely terrible throughout the game, but O'Reilly and McGregor played very well, except that they simply failed at any point basically to try and hit the target from any of the many chances that they had, including a penalty for O'Reilly, with obviously one exception. So they were like, there were bits to that Celtic game that were better when, for a spell in the second half, Taylor and Johnston started to kind of play inverted, like under the kind of Postecoglou style. Taylor looked good in that spell. Taylor looked very bad, as did Johnston. Sorry, they were both terrible in the fullback position, and especially in the latter part of the game, because Fabio Silva got the better of Johnston over and over and over again, which luckily for Celtic, Silva is still heartless and still didn't really do anything when he got himself into those positions, because he misses a brilliant chance as well. Yep. But Johnston felt to me like Johnston thought he had a touch of the Lustigs. He thought he could be the main character. He thought he could just cement Silva and just bully him, rather than just defending him normally. And Silva was at least wise to that. And when Johnston would come hearing at him, he would just kind of get out of the way. It was like one of those kind of clown things where like the guy's running full pace towards him, he just steps out of the way at the last minute. And so there were some real concerns for Celtic. I would say their centre half played well right enough, but it was a very floppy performance from Celtic that it didn't need to be. But Rangers did bring the aggression, I suppose, that they completely lacked in that 3-3 game. I mean, not talking about Lundstrom's tackle, which is pointless aggression, but in the first 20 minutes, although Celtic had a lot of openings, Rangers were at least in their faces all over the park a little bit more, which could have worked, except that by getting into the faces of a couple of the midfielders, there always seemed to be like a third one standing 25 yards from goal completely unmarked. So it worked and it didn't work. Like, at least all of the things that I criticised Rangers for in their performance in the 3-3 draw last month had been sort of resolved, but it was very much like fixing one problem and another one appeared, like trying to plug a leak, but pulling out the thing to plug it, just causing a leak in a different part of your house. It was that kind of vibe. But yeah, like, I mean, I think it is not a surprise that as the quality drops in these two teams, the entertainment value of the games increases massively, because it was a very entertaining game.
Yeah, totally agree. And again, like, I don't want to spend any longer on this than they absolutely have to. And I suppose the best thing to focus on about it is quite how daft Kenny Miller has sounded throughout in the aftermath of it as well, which is the only man in the country who seems to view it as not being a red card. As John Lundstrom was sent off for launching himself into Alistair Johnston's shin.
It wasn't the best sort of 10 minutes for Lundstrom as he loses his man for the first goal. I thought they were being very generous to him and saying he couldn't do much about that. I thought it was really shit. The own goal he scores, and then Rangers get themselves back into the game, and he then absolutely cements Johnston. And I liked it was that constant assertion that Johnston put his foot in between Lundstrom and the ball. I'm like, well, yeah, when you try to kick a ball, you have to plant your foot next to it. That's how kicking a ball works. Maybe not for you, Kenny, but and it was the fact that, because I thought in real time, that's an aggressive tackle, but I thought he'd won a fair bit of the ball, and so I was like, oh, probably it's a yellow card just because of how hard they went in. And then they show that replay, and as soon as you see that replay of the studs kind of straight into the ankle or above the ankle, you're like, right, this is clearly a red card. Sutton saw it straight away. I think Miller did say he thought it was going to be a red card. He just didn't think it should have been one, which didn't make any sense. And then I think the ultimate ignominy is when it's a decision in one of these games and Chris Boyd is less blinkered than you. I think you need to just hang up the microphone at that point.
It was one of those ones, like, again, I'd missed the first half, saw the second half, sort of went back to watch the highlights, and it was one of those ones, as soon as it came up in the highlights, I was like, this is definitely going to be Lundstrom being sent off, because the way his movement is from the moment the ball is clearly going, because again, Hart telegraphs it a million years away, that the ball is going to go straight to Johnson, and from the first movement that Lundstrom makes, I was like, you're going to get put off for this, because your immediate thought is just the aggression of getting there.
Yeah, it was targeting him. He was trying to make a kind of big hero tackle, as in like a lift the team. I was going to say lift the crowd. There wasn't obviously the Rangers crowd in there, but like it was one of those where he's like, it's like a predator spotting like their prey, and he's like, he sees it a mile off and he makes a beeline, and you know exactly what's coming. And if you get that tackle right, then fair enough. Yeah, it probably does, raise the stakes, and maybe it fires people up, and maybe that was what he was going for. But if you get that tackle wrong, which is what he did, you will be sent off and you will cost your team any chance of winning the league. And that's what happened.
Fingers crossed that he gets a new contract. Nonetheless, that takes us to our final game of the weekend, which takes us to Tynecastle, where Heart of Midlothian thumped Dundee 3-0. While this game had 3 goals in it, I had some good performances, particularly from Mackay. Vargas was quite good. I thought Forrest was very good as well. It's funny that Shanklin performs well, but ultimately doesn't really matter, and he's not the top performer in the team. But ultimately, in a game which meant absolutely nothing to anyone in particular.
I think Dundee will be a bit disappointing, because I think like getting into the top 6 this season is a big achievement for them, but it feels very much like St Mirren of last season, where it's like there was a European space there for them, but they've not obviously been able to pick up. They got beat at home by St Mirren last week, which was the big disappointment. But had they got something from this game, they go into midweek and you're looking at it and you're like, well, we've got Rangers away, maybe there's a chance there, but even if not, if they had won this game, they would have been within touching distance of St Mirren. They hope that St Mirren lose to Hearts, and then they go into the final day. St Mirren are at Celtic Park, and they face Tony Docherty faces his good friend Derek McInnes in the final game. They would have been a little bit confident that they could have done something, but this is the one that really just kind of, I mean, they're not making up 5 points on St Mirren. They would need to win both games. St Mirren lose both games. It won't happen. So they'll be disappointed, and I think it was an uncharacteristic. I think their defence is brilliant, and I don't think either of the goalkeepers have had that great a season, but it was an uncharacteristically shambolic defensive performance. Like McCracken had a very, very poor game.
I think they're missing Shaughnessy a lot.
Yeah.
Like Shaughnessy has weaknesses within his game. Undoubtedly, he's a player I've always very much appreciated and thought was very good. I think almost immediately having taken him out of that side, Dundee just look a lot, not quite. Not I wouldn't even go as far as to say all at sea, but they just don't feel anything like as competent as they have done defensively. Again, like you say, it's that St Mirren thing from last year, and what we talked about with St Mirren in the European spot as well. Like, it's, I suppose, getting to the top six is the tangible thing that they have, and that's why they can have their open top bus tour around Dundee and run that down Lochee and get the people out and celebrate it for that top six trophy. But it is feeling a bit flat, and the chances are they'll go through the remainder of the top six without taking a single victory away from that. I think, given Tony Doc's comments afterwards as well, he is in that sort of weird space where he's clearly annoyed about it, and that's his job to be annoyed about it. But then similarly, like, what am I going to say to them? Ultimately, like, they've done absolutely everything that they've been asked of all season long and have performed very well and rightfully made that top six spot their own. Interesting to see Barry Mackay playing such a sort of high profile role with Hearts, a guy that was missed out for the majority of the season for them and has been a big performer for them in the past. And I think Hearts presumably are going to have to start looking at planning for a post-Lawrence Shankland world. You would assume that he will move on at the end of the season. I hope he doesn't, frankly. I hope he does stay at Hearts. I think it's good for the league as a whole to have someone as effective and as good as Shankland has been for Hearts within that team as well, particularly as they look to go and take on another European campaign, which they're guaranteed games up until, was it February potentially, something along those lines.
I have to say I'm lost with the league stages, because the Europa League's got 8 games and the conference has got 6, and I think the conference finishes up in December. I know the Champions League finishes up in February or January, but I actually have no idea when the Europa, the one that Kelly are in, but the one that we've got no chance of getting to the group stage of, a slim chance of getting to the group stage of the other one. I have no idea when the Europa League stage, sorry, we need to call it now, actually finishes off, if it is into the next year, because that would be obviously a technicality, but getting into the new year of in Europe is a rarity for other teams. Yeah, match days 7 and 8 are both in January in the Europa League, so it would that in itself would be a good chance. And I think the thing that's been missed, because obviously the last 2 seasons Hearts and Aberdeen have lost their Europa League playoff round game.
Yeah.
Hearts, in both cases, I think they blew it a wee bit. Like, Hearts, the first time around, like, probably had the better of it and kind of threw it away. Aberdeen last year, they got slightly unlucky in that they were seeded to play Ventspils, or I think from Latvia. If it wasn't them, it was someone from Lithuania. It was someone from one of those 2 countries. But they picked up a surprise result in the other competition, which meant that it knocked the Swedish team down into their group, and like Häcken did a number on them, absolutely. But Aberdeen should have won that tie. The Scottish team should be the favourite to win their Europa League playoff game, probably, or at least they've got a very winnable tie. And there's obviously this slim chance, I don't think it will happen, that they could go straight into the Europa League groups if like they get four snookers, I think.
Yeah.
like they need Dortmund to win the Champions League, and they need Bayer Leverkusen to lose a game. So it seems unlikely to happen. But I think winning through that playoff round would be big in terms of getting 2 extra games, apart from anything. So
yeah,
we'll
I mean, the only sort of general concern for Hearts is, again, like, do you speculate to bring players in on the basis that you're going to get that cash, or do you try and play that balance and try and bring in somebody else that can start to? I mean, Hearts are
they just need to put another cow in the club shop, and they're fine.
Hearts are kind of in that weird place in that Motherwell were last year, and that how do you replace someone that scores that many goals? And kind of comically enough, Motherwell, after spending the entire the Pie and Bovril thread, was just a bunch of us just repeating over and over again, we'll just replace them in the aggregate. It's the money ball. We'll just replace them in the aggregate. It's fine. Which, as it turns out, is exactly what we did, as Motherwell reached 20 different scorers for the team this season, which is fucking ridiculous as well. But yeah, all in all, I'll leave it there in that case. Nonetheless, thank you very much for your time this evening, Craig. Unless you get something desperate you want to add about Dundee Football Club.
No, that was a very well organised and very, very structured podcast we put together there. So thanks very much for that. Definitely some clear points being made by both of us.
Smashing. There will presumably be about 25,000 different podcasts coming out this week. Some of them will be on YouTube, some of them will be on Patreon. If you've got any questions about that, I suggest you speak to Craig Fowler, because I don't have a clue. But nonetheless, thank you very much for your time, Craig. Do enjoy Europe. Hopefully, it can be when we're in Germany. Is the draw? When's the draw?
The draw is on the day of the Switzerland game.
Smashing. So once again, we can be in Germany. Craig and I were on holiday in France at the Women's World Cup last time, standing on the Champs-Elysees. Craig was trying to book flights to somewhere that we won't talk about. So hopefully we can do that again. That'll be good fun this time.
Hopefully wherever I'm travelling to, Kilmarnock actually join me there this time. We'll wait and see. At least, as I say, even if we lose, we've still got another go, so that helps. We'll be in Europe into August this year, which is all you can hope for.
A good laugh. Magic. Right. Thank you, dear listeners. We will see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.